Welcome. This is Mariana Nork with ANCOR. I'm delighted to introduce this webinar. Dennis Miller is the founder and chairman of DCM Associates, experts in nonprofit leadership executive search and board and nonprofit leadership coaching. I should say that DCM Associates is also a valued ANCOR national partner at the gold level. You'll be hearing today from Dennis himself. He's a nationally recognized strategic leadership coach and an executive search consultant with more than 35 years of experience working with nonprofit board leadership and chief executives across the country. He's also an expert in leadership development, philanthropy, and succession planning. In addition, Dennis is a sought-after motivational speaker, a retreat facilitator, and a leader performance coach. Although his first career move might have been mopping floors at a Ramada Inn, his hunger for knowledge eventually led to an Ivy League education and his success as a medical center chief executive officer. With his book called Mopping Floors as CEO, From Hopelessness and Failure to Happiness and Success, Dennis shares his true life courage and inspirational journey that shows that you too can achieve a great vision for your life. He's worked with hundreds of nonprofits over the years and providing them with the knowledge and insights to understand the competencies required with today's nonprofit leadership. So it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Dennis Miller, who will lead the seminar. Thank you all for joining us today. And Dennis, take it away.
Well, thank you very much, Mariana. I appreciate that. And it's happy to be with everyone today. And we are very proud to be a partner with ANCOR. All of you on the call and all of you are members of ANCOR do amazing, fabulous work for so many individuals and families with people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and brain trauma and a whole range of stuff. So I'm just delighted to be here. And again, thank you, Mariana. Presentation today is about the executive search process. Book I wrote, I always joke with people, if Mrs. Fritz, my 7th grade English teacher, knew I wrote 2 sentences together, she'd have a heart attack. If she knew I wrote 5 books, she'd have a massive heart attack and come back to the baby. And I don't know, I wasn't a very good student back then. But I wrote a book called A Guide to Recruiting Your Next CEO, the Executive Handbook for Nonprofit Boards. I just looked at it again today. I realized it was written 5 years ago, but it's relevant for regardless of what search you're doing, but any type of C-suite search. And everybody's going to get a free copy of the book as a download. So let's start the process about search. Mariana was nice enough to introduce myself, so I can skip all that. I appreciate all that. And again, you will get a copy of not only the PowerPoint today and a copy of the recording, but you're going to get a link that you can download a free copy of the book, A Guide to Recruiting Your Next CEO.
Hey, Dennis, I just need to interrupt you for a minute. I am seeing your presentation just fine, but one of the participants put in the chat section that you don't seem to be in slide mode. You're not sharing.
Okay, hold on, fine. Okay, hold on. Let's see. You're probably right. Okay. Ask them what they are now.
Chet, how's that? Great. Ready to go. Thank you, everybody.
Not Mr. Technology. Sorry about that. Okay. So today's discussion is about executive recruitment and whether you're recruiting a CEO or somebody else in the C-suite office, or whether you're going to use your own internal resources or you're going to engage in an executive search firm. I want to identify for you what I believe from my experience of, I'm going to afraid to admit, Mariana, 40 years of experience, but of the 5 stages of an effective search. First stage, these are applicable wherever you're going to do this. The first stage of a search is not just to post a job and post a job description. It's really important that you spend time analyzing the strategic challenges that your organization is facing as your CEO or CFO or COO or whatever has decided to take another job or retire or resign or whatever, or be terminated. It's really important for you to do that because all of us who are in these current positions, and when we leave, in spite of how great we've been, the level of competence that we required for the next person may be very different. So it's important to spend time analyzing the challenges that not only the organization is facing, but the role that the new position will play. That's very important. And I'll show you in a second here a sample of an ideal position profile that you're going to want to create. Second stage, that's the first stage. Second stage is the outreach. This is where the rubber hits the road. When organizations and try to do it themselves, sometimes the reason it's not successful because they're going to get candidates that are looking for a job that either are not happy in their job or whatever, but may not be. Oftentimes, if you do it passively, you're not going to get people that are happy in their job and not looking for a job. You're going to get only those looking for a job. So at the second stage, along with what this is to conduct a very extensive targeting outreach to organizations and professional trade groups to identify potential candidates with the competencies, skills, and personal attributes you are required. We'll talk about what that means, but that's a very important stage here. It is, again, it's really like the detective work. It is really like seeking for people that are not interested, not seeking a job, but maybe qualified for the job, that you want to find a chance to talk with them, and that's really, really important. The third stage is like anything else, whether it's yourself or a search firm, you want to approach candidates and test their interest in the new opportunity, but more importantly, persuade them, strong candidates, to consider the opportunity. That's the third stage. There's a whole lengthy process of interviewing them, and a lot of interviews today are on Zoom or virtual, and then obviously final interviews are done certainly in person. It's important to have that done. We'll explain that, and I'll take any questions you have throughout the process as best we can. So you want to present the most qualified candidates after conducting that extensive outreach. We use personality and leadership assessment tools that help best match the ideal position profile. We'll explain somewhat what that means here a little bit. And obviously, not only completing the search, whether you're doing it yourself or using a firm, but I would say factually 50% of nonprofit CEOs or executive directors, and I use the term interchangeably, never receive an onboarding. I'll explain what onboarding is. Also, the amazing thing, even 5 years ago when I wrote this book, at the urging of my colleague, Michelle Hickey, was back then, research was showing that 75% of nonprofit executives plan to retire in 5 or 10 years. And I could see it through our search work. So there's a lot of baby boomers that, sort of products of the 60s and 70s of social movement that went to the sector that are, in their 60s plus and retiring. And there's a lot of opportunities there. So that's the 5 stages. The first decision you're going to have to make for yourselves is, do I do it ourselves? You have the time and energy. Now, I'm not here to say you on DCM. I want this to be an educational discussion and session and have you think through this here. The difference between doing it yourself and having a firm do it, besides a fee involved in that, is you have the resources on the board or in your own organization to do the active outreach. It's relatively, you should have someone from the outside come in and assess your organization as to where you're at. And when Jane or John Doe retire after 25 years or 20 years, or 10 years, and they've done a great job, hopefully, it doesn't mean that you're just going to find someone to replace them, because you want to make sure that there's a lot of challenges going on that we didn't have before. So biggest thing is do you have the time and energy to do it? That's where I've seen people say, we're going to do it ourselves. I say, fine, but then I realize they do very poorly on outreach. They post a job on Indeed or on LinkedIn. And I tell people, LinkedIn is one thing, but Indeed for CEO executive searches is not going to really help you much at all. The big aspect, again, is passive versus active. Most people that are qualified for the job are not necessarily seeking a job. And even if they saw the advertisement post, they may not apply for a couple of reasons. One is they're not interested. 2 is concerned about confidentiality, that they don't know that you're going to learn who they are, and maybe you know their boss, so they're not going to apply for the job. So not that qualified people can't apply for jobs they see online, but most times they're not. And so the best way of going about it is an active approach versus passive approach, and that's where the search fee comes in, search firm comes in. And again, search fees are, generally speaking, ours are on the lesser side, and we have a discount for anchor members, about 25%, not to exceed 25% of the base salary. But with a cap on it, we have for anchor members, but other search firms probably charge maybe 30% of the 35% of the fee. But at the end of the day, when you're involved in a lawsuit, you're going to hire an attorney to represent you. Doing auditors, you have audit expense. So it's an investment decision to make, but it's a key position here. One of the things that any organization should do prior to starting a search is kind of think about, I don't think you need, I get this a lot. Do we do a strategic plan and then hire the CEO, or do we hire the CEO and then do this strategic plan, or any level of C-suite position here? And I say, I don't think you need to do a strategic plan per se, but I do think you need to define your strategic vision. What comes first, the chicken or the egg, So I do believe it's important for you as an organization to kind of assess where you plan to go, where you hope to achieve, what obstacles you may be having here. But it's clear, and we'll talk about it in a second, understanding the level of competencies that you may need today are very different than you might have needed 5 or 10 years ago. Those are some of the, and what are the key challenges that your organization is having? And what, if any, internal obstacles you're having? And so those are questions that you want to be thinking about before you sort of launch a search. An interview questions is, what are the challenges we're facing, both internally and externally here? Okay. So I do believe today there are a number of key leadership competencies, and I'm focusing mostly, obviously, on the CEO suite, but you could say the same thing for a director of an executive at any level in your organization. But today, boards are seeking these kind of competencies. In the past, and they're still valid, in the past, boards sought someone that was very passionate about their mission, good community relationship person, a program and service developer, and a grant writer. And those competencies or skills and experience are still very important. But today, boards are seeking very different things from their executives. In the past, oftentimes boards set the vision and they wanted you to come in and help implement it. Today, boards are looking for people to set the vision for us and develop that vision. That's really important. So someone who can have the ability to visualize the future of your organization before you do. That's, and I'm telling you, having done with Mariana and others at ANCOR and across the country, dozens of workshops and programs we've done on leadership development and asking people, what's your vision? It is the simplest question to ask. It is the most difficult question to answer. So it's really, really important for people to think about someone who has visionary thinking skills. Emotional intelligence is very high on the list today. I always joke that I think I know my IQ is not that high because my wife can beat me in Jeopardy every night because unless it's U.S. cities or sports. But I do have a high level of emotional intelligence only because of the challenges I had as youth, overcoming it and spending decades in analysis and therapy and growing emotionally. And so having the ability to learn how to react to other people, to have an empathy for other people. You cannot be a good executive at any level without compassion. And I can't overstate that. So you want to, when you're looking at competencies for kind of person you're replacing, even at your CFO level, at COO level, you want to, do they have a high level of emotional intelligence? And the relationship builder is huge. Today, I use the word chief executive officer as chief external officer oftentimes. That's relationship building. It's one of the things that I was really good at was relationship building. I may have not been great at everything else per se, but it was a relationship builder. So the key today for any executive in nonprofit space is how well can they build relationships. In the corporate world, where I spent a number of almost a decade or so, in the corporate world, you'll know, the board chair or board chairperson is the face of the organization, and that's in all the worlds what you deal with. You know, it was Steve Jobs at Apple, whatever. Okay, Bill Gates at Microsoft. That was the chair, the founder. In the nonprofit world, it's your CEO. Though they have to be able to be comfortable building relationships inside and outside your organization. The next competency to me, I call it entrepreneurial spirit. Same thing, CEO, Chief Entrepreneurial Officer. It's not just about seeking public funding anymore and grants and things like that. It's really about the ability to go out and seek people to invest in your organization. It's really, really important here. Another one is a brand builder. Today, most of us went into the sector not to tout our horn. We went into because it's true, we care, and I know all of you do, and I'm so proud of all the work that you do. You should be complimented and be thanked every day, and I mean it sincerely. But today, you have to be able to tout your horn. You got to be able to tell people the impact you're having, your success and achievements. I'll never forget, a long time ago, when I started the company back in 2005, I did a retreat for someone. And I asked them if they could tell me the top 2 achievements, and they just couldn't name anything. It was pretty embarrassing. Today, so you want to be a brand builder, and there's all the things you do on social media, but you want to be a brand builder. You want to tell people the impact you're having. And best when you can have people tell the impact through the eyes of those you serve. Collaborator. Do you do it all by yourself, or can you collaborate and have affiliations with other people? And certainly, but not last minute, someone who's going to be an inspirational motivator. Those are the competencies that you want to seek for in a new executive, and that's something you should be discussing. Okay. So as part of the end of phase 1, the first 5 stages here is the candidate profile. And I'm just going to show you something here. This is just a profile we did a couple of years ago, research, an organization called LifePath. About a $60 million place, I believe, in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. It's deals with intellectual disabilities, and we always like to highlight the organization first. And you would want to do this yourself, highlight your organization, little photos, not too much wording, but little links to your organization, your click about annual reports, things like that. Just a little bit. You want to attract people to your organization first. And then you want to describe the roles and responsibilities of the position, like it's described here. But then obviously you want to describe, more importantly, also the ideal competencies and experience you're seeking. And then some cases, your compensation package. And today, believe it or not, in New York and in California, it's now required in job postings to post the salary range. It's a law. It's probably going to become national here. And how do they get a hold of you? So if you're going to be recruiting for someone, you want to go through the ideal candidate profile process at the end of that. But to get that, you have to have really discussion about who you are, where you're going, and things like that. Okay. This is just another example of another organization that we helped, that was dealing with children and disabilities and families, and but same thing, sort of a profile of the organization, make it attractive to that, and then obviously talk about the qualification and competencies and things like that. Just a little bit of that. So that's phase 1. Phase 2 is, so how do you start looking for people? Yes, I mean, you could, let's go right ahead. You can put, you can put an ad in Indeed, but you're most likely, and I had a client once that was like, I remember saying that, Joanne, you don't put an ad in Indeed, it's not gonna help you. Oh, Dennis, we gotta do Indeed. Oh, you wanna be outreaching to key sector leaders. So if you are looking for a head of disabilities program in Wisconsin, or you're head of your disabilities program in New York City, or whether it's a COO or CEO, whatever you're looking for, one of the things you want to do is, your first thing is want to reach out to people in the trade associations that you're part of, ANCOR particularly. Reach out to Mariana, reach out to Barbara Merrill, her fabulous team, Gabrielle, and all the great people that are there. And say, hey, who do you know that we should be talking to that might be interested? I'll come back to that conflict here. So outreach, professional trade association, your chambers of commerce, chamber, local, your state or regional chamber of commerce can have a lot of contacts with nonprofit members. and you can see in all the other organizations that are socially mission-driven in your region. You can talk to their leaders, and we do it in our search. We have a mechanism, which I'll explain a little bit of how we do our social candidate research and things like that. But you do need to do this, and this is where when people tell me they're going to do it themselves, they fall down. And this is where the rubber hits the road. I think it's important to use social media. I think it's fine. I think it's really important. And what I said here below is, I remember used to reach out to someone at the head of this chamber, head of that chamber, trade association. Someone said, "Man, I'm not sure who's interested." And I say, "I'm not interested in who's interested. I want to know, who do you think would be an ideal candidate?" So you should not be just interested in who's interested and who's looking for a job. That's a small percentage of the marketplace. You should be so proud of your organization. I know you are, but you should be so proud of your organization to sell that organization to people an opportunity to learn more about it and get them thinking, "Hey, I never thought about it, but hey, I'm open to having at least a conversation." So that is stage 2 here. That is really, really important to have this targeted outreach here, if that makes sense. Okay. Now, candidate screening. Certainly, you're going to want someone to send you a cover letter and their resume. It's really important, and cover letters can say a lot about people. I think it's important for people to connect. When I advise someone to send a cover letter, describe briefly how you learned about the position and why, just briefly. And if you are on the webinar today and you're actually on because you're not looking for someone, but you may be looking to find your next job, you want to write a cover letter to highlight some things about your background, that may not be reflected in your resume, so they see it. And particularly if they have a job description, but a profile, an ideal candidate like I just showed you, you want to highlight some things about yourself in that. Clearly, there's going to be interviewing process. We use tools to guide our clients on interviews, but you kind of, I'm going to get that in, but you're going to certainly have interviews, and you're going to have a leadership assessment tool. We have a partnership with Telexis. We're going to show you what that looks like in a second, but we, on all final candidates, we kind of want to do a personality leadership assessment tool to measure how people are wired. I'm going to give you a couple examples here in a second. And certainly, last but not least, before someone is hired, we do, and you want to do an extensive reference check, but here's what I would suggest you do. Don't just ask people to give you 3 references and they give you their friend and their fraternity or sorority sister and things like that, or the next door neighbor. We require someone at least 3, sometimes 5 references, but someone you've worked for, someone you've worked with, as a peer, as a colleague, and someone who's worked for you as a direct report to you. And we do telephone reference checking and write a report, and you want to compare those references to each other to see how they stack out here. I also think it's really important to do social media reviews and LinkedIn profile reviews, because we had a situation not that long ago where someone said they did one job, but had LinkedIn profiles and did another, and we had to call and verify that. So you want to do that kind of stuff. But candidate screening, you want to be inviting them into your organization, and it's appropriate today to start your initial interviews on Zoom or any kind of team meetings, whatever you have here. Okay. When you are interviewing candidates, and at the executive level again, we recommend, and we have a matrix that we give to our clients to help them identify the questions, and we provide about 25 or 30 questions that we might consider you to ask, but you ask them whatever you want to ask. But there's questions usually in leadership. So you want to ask people about their leadership ability, their leadership experience, their leadership attributes, something they tried that failed, what did they learn from? I'm a big believer. Marianne will know, my colleagues will know. Listen, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I've learned from them. And I, speak a lot, and I tell people, we have this thing in our culture about avoiding mistakes. And I'm like, you know what? It's how you learn. I've learned every time I made a mistake, whatever it might have been. And, I think about like a little child, you have a little child born or grandson or granddaughter in a home or friend, and and they're crawling around in the family room and you see them crawling and then they try to stand up and they fall down. That's not a failure. They're learning. So we want to ask people, what mistake did you make that you learned from? You also want to ask people about strategic thinking. How do they, what's the last thing that they felt they did as an innovative thinker? What strategically did they do differently at a previous organization? That's a sense of how well do they think? Again, interpersonal relationships is very important. I mean, and all the work we do, it comes down to, are they qualified clearly to do the job? But if they don't fit in, if you don't fit in, or the candidates don't fit in and blend, if someone says, oh, I just, I don't, there's something about them that they're not team players, it damages it. So interpersonal relations are very important. Board relationship, what's been your experience? If you're an executive team member, what's your experience with dealing with a board? If you're a CEO candidate, how have you developed board? What have you done for board governance and things like that? What's your communication style? Is there a cultural fit? So there's a lot of questions you want to be asking people. And this is when you're into stage 3. So just go back for a second. Stage 1 was the strategic assessment of our organization, or your organization, of where you were at and what are the competencies we need. So you may have had someone been a great job that been there for years and retiring, but doesn't mean what their competencies were the same that you're going to need going forward. So you want to take a fresh look at that. Then I say stage 2, you're going to create a profile, not just a job description. A job description is okay, but it doesn't sell you on the organization. It tells what the job description does and doesn't even mention much about the ideal competency you're seeking. So that profile is really important here. So now we're in stage 3 and you're going to be interviewing people. You want to have a whole series of interviews. Now, however you do it on an executive search, most times there's a search committee, certainly at the CEO level. Book disclaims of what role people should play or not play. With a few rare exceptions, we do not at all recommend that your retiring CEO be involved in interviewing new candidates. It's awkward. I don't see much positive coming from it. I always tell people, though I've been married for 41 years, I haven't been divorced, but if I was divorced, I wouldn't ask my ex-wife to introduce my new wife to the neighbors. And I just think that it's a board's responsibility to hire your CEO on an executive side. If you're doing an executive search, clearly a COO search, you're going to have other people on the team. That's appropriate here. I think there's no problem with that whatsoever. That is perfectly fine. And I do think, though, even at the CEO level, though I don't think this should be on the search committee, I think it's totally appropriate, and we go out of our way to do an employee focus group to say, what would you like characteristics or competencies or attributes in your next CEO? It's important for them to feel they've had input. I believe that. I'm sorry.
I just lost the sound. I don't know about anybody else.
What?
Okay, there you are. Okay, you went mute for a minute.
Oh, I apologize for that. I don't know what happened. Don't know what happened. Okay. I see. I think Brad just joined us too here. So, I think it's really important about that, and we'll take questions on them. So we use a tool. I know it's hard to look at here, and but we're going to get this tool as part of our report sent to you. But it's a tool that takes about 40. We administer it takes for each final candidate about 45 minutes to answer it. But it's there's a job match based upon core competencies. So it can change for a CEO, and you're a salesman at Target. It's a different score for you. That's the work you do here. But it comes down to kind of where do you stack up on things like strategic thinking? You can see here manageability, competitiveness, sense of urgency, take charge, people contact, etc. Now we just finished a search for an organization recently, and one of the board members said, "Oh, this person's got a 5. How come he's sending us 5s? We want 10s." I said, No. You don't want a 10. You want someone in this bracket here. You don't want someone the high or the low. And there's explained to do, but this is kind of where you want the core personality to be at. And so a couple of things here. This is the other tools. We like this tool a lot. But a sense of urgency. So someone could be here. This person had a high sense of urgency, which is really okay. But sometimes you have too much of a sense of urgency, you can forget precision and accuracy. And this is another one, sort of high sense of take charge. But obviously, you want someone to take charge, but certainly you also want someone who's going to make people part of the decision process here. I've seen people here that, and again, this is how one is, their DNA is how people are wired. But I'm going to show you some questions you can ask here. But example, I know someone that's got a low people contact score, but in the workplace setting, they're extremely extroverted. They're very good with clients and consumers and people. But at home, they'd rather be watching TV, reading a book. That's fine. This just shows you how they're wired. And when we use these tools here, we give you sample questions that you may want to ask if you're interviewing the candidate. Other question we want to ask, we give us some. This is Sarah's sample, obviously. But in this case here, on the sense of urgency, Sarah may become frustrated if her colleagues don't share a high sense of urgency. Sarah become impatient if the workplace becomes too slow. Sarah may, put colleagues at a higher pace, and it may be a source of conflict. So we give you some samples of kind of the things you may want to ask people, but it's a tool we use. It's not the end all be all. For us and for you, the interview should be the most important tool you use. So that is the process for that measuring and that kind of things. Again, we're talking about C-suite CEO searches. People may ask about a search committee. I think it's important to have a search committee. The question becomes, what size and composition? I'd say if you're still in a CEO search, depends upon the size of your board, but I think 5 to 7 people is maximum. I think 3 is a little bit too low. I've had a client that had 10 people too many. I think that, and you want someone to, we'll get to the role of the chair, but someone who's a forward-thinking person. There's not, people say, what do I do with my former board chair? Can he or she be on the committee? Yes. But they need to be forward-thinking, not looking backwards here. So role of search committee is, it should be members of your board, but doesn't have to be. You can have a consultant that you use that's an expert in HR or hiring in your community. It's possible you could have someone from the ANCOR group that you may want to have, ask if someone was available at that size, but you want to have a committee about 5 to 7 time frames. Our searches take 90 to 120 days from start to finish. It's the 5 stages, including hiring. I think that's fair and reasonable if it's done right. I mean, you do it on yourself, it could be 6 months, depends how long you're spending interviewing, things like that. Again, you make sure that you are aligning the key strategic goals for your organization with the candidates coming in. Your board chair should be, the search committee chair does not have to be the board chair. It often is. It doesn't have to be. I'd say 50-50 in our world. But the search committee chair should be one communicating to the entire board the status of the search, how things are coming along, how many candidates we've seen or how many we're interviewing. That kind of type of thing here. One of the things that's very important regardless of who is doing the kind of search is confidentiality. It is crucial that your committee, whether it's for a CEO search or any search that you're doing, keeps the names of the people that are interviewing confidential. You could be liable for that. You could be liable if their current employer found out and of course in their job, you could be liable for that. Again, we recommend tools to be interviewing candidates. We recommend everybody in the search committee take a time and ask a question. So if you've got, say, 5 members of the search committee, your first interview is going to be at least an hour, and you want to schedule about 75 minutes, maybe with a 15-minute break in between. I don't recommend you do, some people can do 4 in a day. I think 2 in a day is a lot. If you're interviewing 6 candidates, you may want to spread them over a week or 2, 2 on Tuesday, 2 on Thursday, 2 next week, something like that. I think it's really important for all of you, and us, but certainly yourselves, is selling the candidate. When you are involved in a committee or in the interview process, And this is the same true, obviously, if you are participating in the webinar today and you're hoping to be a candidate in a search process. But more importantly, it's not just to listen to what the candidate is saying, but you want to, they're still thinking about your organization. They're going to leave with an impression. So it is really, really, really important that you sell them and be positive on them. So even if you were interviewing someone, and I know we've all done it, I'm sure Mariana has done it, I know I've done it. I interview someone in the first 5 seconds, you go, "It ain't working out. This is not working out. This is not working out, whatever." I don't know. I can't work with someone with a size 20 shoe. I don't know what it is. There's something about them that just, there's something like that. I'm just joking, hopefully. You still got to go and leave them a good impression. You got to listen. And so you want to be involved in selecting your final candidate, and that's a process. And I think at any level, selecting a CO candidate or a COO candidate, I think it's important to have input from the staff. I think the final 1 or 2 candidates should meet with the board and meet with key leaders of your organization, get a feel. I think it's fun. And then last but not least, in terms of the process, is negotiate the offer. Some of our clients want to negotiate the offer themselves, which is great. Some ask us to do it because they don't want to get in, over hustles about $5,000 or $2,000 or 2 days of vacation day and things like that. But that is kind of that's the sort of the stages here. And so there's one other piece I think that's really important to talk about, but the 5 stages are strategic assessment, creating the profile. The outreach is aggressive and timely. The interviewing the candidates is crucial, and the assessment of candidates. But here's the next piece. I don't care what position you're in, and our firm focuses solely on CEO and C-suite searches and executive leadership. We do a lot of programs for other support here, but it's really important to have an onboarding process. What I mean by that is that someone's coming from one organization to another. Each organization, in spite of maybe sometimes similar missions, it's a different personality. And so you want them to become adjusted to the social and cultural and professional adjustments they're going to have to make here. You want them to know in the beginning, what is the first thing that I need you to complete within the first 30 days? Who are the 5 people that I want you to be introduced to today or tomorrow? You want to make sure that if it's a CEO or whatever executive level there is, that you're going to introduce them to the people in the community so they get to know you and whatever it's going to be. You want to make sure they know the strategic challenges that you are facing. I mean, we did all that as part of the search process, but do it again. You want to be communicating with them and who, what, and when. If I'm this new CEO, how often does the board chair want to meet with me? By phone, by breakfast, Zoom virtual, in person, whatever. I think it's very important to have some milestones there. How am I going to be evaluated on my job here? How will you evaluate me? And that's a question. If you're a candidate, how will you evaluate me in my first 30, 90 days? In 1 year or 3 years? How are you going to evaluate me? It's amazing to me still how many executives don't even get any kind of evaluation tool. We have CEO evaluation tools and self-evaluation come to it. We have all those tools on our website, DennisCMiller.com or DCM Associates and all that stuff you get. But it's really important to prepare. And so you've hired the person. Thank God we finally got the CEO we need, the executive director. We finally got the right COO or chief strategy officer, CFO, whatever. But don't just end it there. I know you've got a lot of work to do, but make sure there's an onboarding process to see how that's coming along. All right. I think we're at the end. We're going to sort of stop sharing here in a second here and have time for a couple things here. So I'm going to see if there's that time for anybody to have any questions, but I know that if you are with someone and you question about them, just say, I have a friend, and ask them about them. But also, I want you to know this, as a courtesy to with our relationship with Barbara and Mariana and the whole team there, anybody that would like a free 30-minute consultation on Zoom meeting with me, and I don't have a stopwatch if it's 45 minutes over, I don't know whatever, just email me, Dennis@dcm-associates.com. We'll schedule that when we can. We're going to send you for those of you just joined, maybe a little bit late, we're going to send you the recording. We're going to send you the PowerPoint itself here, and you're going to have the opportunity to get a free download of the book, A Guide to Recruiting the Next CEO, the Executive Search Handbook for Nonprofit Boards. So with all that said here, to see Mariana, if anybody has any questions. And if you have a question or thinking about a question, that means someone else might have it be benefiting to them. So why don't we start to see if anybody has a question or comment.
And Dennis, I want to make sure that people can unmute themselves if they have questions. But, let me start it off. Let me just ask you generally, what have you seen in the last 2 years? What has changed because of COVID? What have that effects been, Dennis?
Well, I mean, no one could have imagined, I always tell people, if you went to the movies in December of 2019 and saw the movie COVID-19 and come out, you'd be scared to death, Yeah. I think a couple of things. I think really what it's allowed every organization is kind of reassess its mission because a lot of people couldn't do things. So there's a lot of reassessment going on. But I think it gave people time to think and kind of, come together a new way with workforce settings and doing a lot of virtual work and things like that. For us, I think the biggest change we're seeing is the kind of competencies that boards are seeking in their new CEO or executive director. I think, again, nothing at all wrong. Listen, I mean, if someone's not mission driven, I wouldn't hire you and you wouldn't either and not get a job. But I think there's people looking for, so guide us to the future. They're looking for people that are visionary thinking. I think also today more than ever, collaborate. Can we collaborate with someone? So I once did a conference speaker workshop, and I remember it was a bank that put it on, a well-known bank, and the bank chairman said to me afterwards, "Dennis, how come these people don't collaborate? I get 8 applications for the same grant for kids with cancer," or something like that. And so, collaboration is not just cooperating. Collaboration is when you both share a mission and you can share a goal. I'll give you an example. It's like 1 or 2 that comes to mind. But it's a big, to answer your question, I've seen we did work with an organization on the East Coast that really was involved in Hispanic family services. And a lot of people that were immigrants or low-income people didn't have a lot of information about, hey, when the doctor gives you medicine, take it even when you're feeling better, finish the prescription. So we end up creating a program for them on education, but they didn't have health educators who went to the local medical center and created a program called Health Education. The Hispanic Center had their people and their outreach, and the hospital had its knowledge of education. So it was collaboration, and we've seen things with YMCA's do that with programs, so collaborate. Think about collaboration. It's a great way of things like that. So that's the biggest things we're seeing these days. The other thing I think we're seeing is a high level of more than ever, people, this has gone to the hardest time in people's life. And so I think a high level of emotional intelligence is something that is important to see. I think so emotional intelligence, I think, is really something we're seeing a lot. But I'm also seeing just a lot of turnover. People say, I'm done. It's time for me done. We have a civic program. People think about the next step. So those are some of the challenges we're having here. And see if anybody, please unmute yourself. Please just unmute yourself. And if I have to do it for you, do I do that? Huh?
Or else you can use the raised hand symbol.
Yeah, just raise your hand, please. And just please, I just feel you can show us your faces and say hello and join the group here.
Hey, Dennis, let me ask you another question, because this is always a big deal. So you talk about the need to do the assessment, the stakeholder study. Have you seen situations where an organization said, I just don't have time, I'm going to skip that, I'm going to dive right in, and they ended up having to come back and repeat the process because of that, not going through the effective assessment stage?
Yes. I'm not going to say the organization, okay?
Don't do it.
But let's put it this way. We recently did a search for a CEO. And the CEO reached out to me that was retiring. And I remember meeting with the board chair, who was a very bright man, businessman. And we got hired, went through our process and talked about how we think it's really good idea to have an assessment for us of how well your organization is working, your board, because that's important. Because I have this expression, Mariana, that's every board wants us to recruit Superwoman and Superman, but every Superwoman and Superman wants to work for a super board and super organization. So sometimes we help you kind of get there. This board chair was like, "Oh, we don't need an assessment. We're fine." And the CEO is like wringing his head, they need it. And so I always think it's like, I see a lot of resistance throughout the sector of, oh, I wrote articles about this, about, how do I tell my board to improve? I'm the CEO, and I get all that. But the more you can create an environment in your organization, continue learning, but be open to learning yourself. And that's sometimes where outside people can help you see that self. So I've seen it come back to bite them in the butt. I really have seen it too often, and it's kind of a shame, because then you hire a CEO or COO, whatever, and yet you haven't fixed yourself. And so all the investment you made in a search firm and investing in this new CEO, you haven't accepted your own situation to improve on. And I see a lot of it. The other thing, just the last piece here, again, for all the people joining here, again, whether you're on the board or CEO, or you're thinking about recruiting people, and again, I'm happy to chat with you. And or you're, just say, hey, I never met a search firm before, so what's it like to meet somebody that does this work here? Ideal candidates exist, but you got to go out and find them. Posting a job on the social media by itself is going to give you maybe one candidate for every 100 that will be qualified. I know we only have about sort of 10 minutes left here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can think about. There's a lot of turnover, but there's a lot of opportunity. And here's what I'd say to people, one last thing, for all of the people participating and everybody who's a member here. When opportunity comes your way, consider it. I always tell people, if you take a new job and you're not feeling a bit overwhelmed, you took the wrong job. If you take a job and you just, hey, I can do this job. I'm comfortable with this job. Or I don't, oh my God, they're thinking about asking me to be the CEO. Too much for me, whatever. And I'll never forget this, Mariana, I'll just tell this one last story and we'll wrap it up here. But so I was going to say a few years ago, when I was a 34-year-old man, you can look at me and see it was just a few years ago, obviously. Let's see, I've been married 3 years at the time, 2 years on our first house. My son was born, and I worked in New York City, lived in Jersey, New Jersey, everybody from Jersey with the Jersey accent, Jersey City, things like that. Yo, brother, sister, and even 3 o'clock accent. And I didn't really want to go to New York. It's a lot big commute, but I didn't want to be a partner in the firm. I wanted to run a hospital. And so I I really wanted to find out the job. So I applied for a job, and my wife of 41 years, who's still with me, believe it or not, if you can imagine that, said to me, "Why are you applying for that job?" She goes, "You could do that job with your eyes closed. You'd be bored in 6 months." I never forget it. It was like striking. And she says, this CFO job, that's when they put people ads in the paper. And I said, wow, I don't know if I'm qualified. She goes, of course you're qualified. Really? You got to believe in yourself. So I threw my hat in the ring. I got the job. And it started my career from 34, I became a 38-year-old CEO. So my point is, be open to opportunities for yourself. Take advantage of everything you can. Take advantage of webinars, programs, learning. There's a ton of free information that all members of ANCOR have access to on our website. There's a ton of free articles, there's other webinars. The books ain't free, but they're not expensive. You want one of my books, you can afford it, email me, I'll give you the book, I'll call my publisher up, seriously. So just be open to the process and be positive and all good things happen. And I think that's where we're at, Mariana. I thank you all. Anybody else question, but reach out to me and we'll be getting we'll get the webinar recording and the PowerPoint out and the link so you can download a free copy of the book for me and we'll go from here. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it.
Dennis, thank you so much. And I think the PowerPoint would be particularly important. I know there's one or two people that were supposed to be on and they had schedule changes. So if you could get the PowerPoint to everybody in the recording, I think they'll find great value in it.
We will, I promise you. And I know people came late. So listen, if you didn't know this here, I do mean this sincerely. I love helping out. Mariana mentioned briefly, earlier in my introduction about Martin was a CEO. So yes, I was a 38-year-old CEO, but at 24 years old, I was homeless and cleaned bathrooms for a living at a hotel. I had a very difficult upbringing and had to overcome a lot of emotional trauma and abuse, and turned out okay, fairly okay. So I really care a lot about what you do and you. And so I'm happy to give this back to you, okay? It comes from my heart. So if anybody wants to, I see there's maybe another question here, just to make double check here.
You're getting people thanking you, saying
Okay.
this is very insightful. So I love seeing that.
All
I
right,
love
so
seeing that.
we'll get it to you, but I got a free copy of the download book. And if there's someone else in your group you want a free download, just give them the download. I'll make sure it's all available. I thank you all very much, Mariana. Thank you. And it's
Dennis, thank you.
to be part of a big sponsorship with ANCOR. Let me just say this to you, and please convey to Barbara Vales. You guys do fabulous work guiding people on the difficult landscape that we're in across the country. And I want to thank you for allowing us to be your partner.
Thank you, Dennis. And thank you, everybody, for joining. And Dennis means it when he says contact him with questions after this. I know he means it. Thank you, Dennis. Take good care, everybody.
Good, Mariana. Bye-bye.
Bye.